Millionaire woman disguised as poor beg for food on the street. The janitor father stopped to help. Before we dive in, let's light up this comment section with hearts from every corner of the world. The November wind sliced through downtown Chicago like a blade, carrying with it the scent of approaching snow and broken dreams. Victoria Sterling, worth over $50 million, sat hunched on the concrete steps of an abandoned storefront, her designer clothes carefully distressed to look like the remnants of a life gone wrong. Her manicured hands, now deliberately dirtied, clutched a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry Mom Needs Help." The irony wasn't lost on her that she could buy the entire city block, yet here she was, begging for scraps from strangers who had no idea they were looking at one of America's most successful businesswomen. At 27, Victoria had built Sterling Enterprises from nothing, turning a small tech startup into a global empire that employed thousands and generated billions in revenue. But success had come at a devastating price. 3 failed relationships, each ending when men discovered they were more interested in her bank account than her heart. Now watching her 6-year-old daughter Emma grow up without a father figure, asking innocent questions about why Daddy didn't live with them anymore, Victoria had reached her absolute breaking point. "Mommy, why are we sitting on this dirty ground?" Emma whispered, her bright blue eyes confused as she huddled closer to her mother. The little girl's normally pristine blonde curls were hidden under a worn knit cap, her expensive clothes swapped for thrift store finds that made Victoria's heart ache. "My feet are getting cold and this place smells funny." "We're playing a very special game, sweetheart," Victoria murmured, scanning the busy street for potential candidates while fighting back tears. "We're going to see how many truly kind people there are in the world. People who help others without expecting anything in return." The truth was far more complex and desperate than any game. Victoria had spent the last 6 months researching this elaborate plan, studying homeless shelters and soup kitchens, learning the language of desperation and need. She'd hired private investigators to identify neighborhoods where genuinely good people lived, working-class areas where character mattered more than credit scores, where children learned values that money couldn't buy. She'd read psychology books about authentic human connection, attended support groups anonymously, anything that would help her identify a man who would love her daughter unconditionally without knowing about the sterling fortune that had become more curse than blessing. Today was the culmination of her desperate search for something that seemed impossible to find in her world of boardrooms and charity galas. A real father for Emma. Not a gold digger, not a social climber, but someone who understood what it meant to sacrifice for a child, to put love before ambition. A businessman in an expensive suit walked past, his phone pressed to his ear, not even glancing in their direction as he barked orders to some unfortunate subordinate. A young couple crossed the street entirely to avoid them, the woman clutching her purse tighter, as if poverty might be contagious. Victoria's heart sank with each passing stranger, but she forced herself to remain patient and hopeful. Somewhere in this vast city was the man she was looking for, someone worthy of her precious daughter. Then she heard footsteps slowing down, different from the hurried pace of everyone else who had passed by without a second glance. Marcus Thompson had been walking home from his second job, exhaustion weighing down his shoulders like a physical burden he'd carried for years. At 35, he worked as a night janitor at Sterling Enterprises, ironically cleaning the very building where Victoria made her millions, though neither knew this crucial detail yet, and spent his days doing maintenance work at a local community center where underprivileged kids could play safely. His 7-year-old daughter Lily skipped beside him despite her own tiredness, her second-hand backpack bouncing with each step, chattering about her day at school and the drawing she'd made for him. "Daddy, look!" Lily tugged on his worn jacket sleeve, pointing toward the 2 figures huddled on the cold concrete steps. "That lady and her little girl look really cold and sad. Can we help them?" Marcus stopped walking, his kind brown eyes taking in the heartbreaking scene before him. He'd grown up in these same unforgiving streets, knew intimately what it meant to go hungry, to feel invisible and forgotten by a world that seemed to have plenty for everyone except people like him. His own mother had raised him alone after his father abandoned them, when Marcus was just 8 years old, working 3 grueling jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. Even now, struggling every day to make ends meet as a single father himself, barely scraping together enough money for rent and groceries, he couldn't walk past someone in need without his conscience demanding action. "Stay right here for just a second, baby girl," he told Lily, kneeling down to her level and brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Daddy's going to see if we can help that lady and her daughter. Sometimes people need kindness more than anything else in the world." Victoria looked up as a shadow fell across her fake cardboard sign, expecting to see another person who would pretend she didn't exist. Instead, she found herself staring into the warmest brown eyes she'd encountered in years of cold business meetings and superficial social interactions. The man standing before her wasn't what she'd expected from her careful research. No polished shoes or designer clothing that marked success. His work boots were scuffed and worn, his jacket patched at the elbows with careful stitches that spoke of pride despite poverty, but his eyes held a genuine warmth and compassion that she hadn't seen since her own father died when she was Emma's age. "Mom, are you and your little girl okay?" Marcus asked gently, his voice carrying the kind of concern that couldn't be faked or bought. "You both look like you could use some help, and it's going to get even colder tonight." Victoria had rehearsed this moment literally hundreds of times in front of her bathroom mirror, practicing different responses and scenarios. But now, faced with this man's completely authentic kindness and the genuine worry in his expression, the carefully prepared words caught in her throat like stones. We haven't eaten anything today," she managed to say, the lie feeling heavier and more toxic than she'd anticipated. "I lost my job last week, and we got evicted from our apartment. I don't know what we're going to do." Without a moment's hesitation, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, and Victoria's heart broke as she realized it was probably his last money until payday. The difference between him eating lunch tomorrow or going hungry. "There's a little diner just around the corner called Mama Rosa's," he said, pressing the money into her dirty hands with surprising gentleness. "She serves good, warm food, and $20 should be enough to get both you and your daughter a proper hot meal. Tell Rosa that Marcus sent you. She'll take good care of you." "Daddy!" Lily appeared beside him, having ignored his instruction to stay put in the way that 7-year-olds everywhere seemed to master. "Can they come home with us instead? We have vegetable soup and it's really good. Mama Rosa taught you how to make it, remember?" Victoria's breath caught in her throat as she got her first clear look at the little girl. Lily had the same bright blue eyes as Emma, the same stubborn, determined chin, even similar golden hair that caught the late afternoon sunlight. The resemblance was so striking and impossible that it made her feel dizzy and confused. "We don't want to impose on your kindness," Victoria said carefully, her trained business instincts warring with unexpected maternal emotions that were rising in her chest. "You've already done so much by offering to help us. No imposition at all, I promise." Marcus smiled, and Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in years, a flutter of genuine attraction that had absolutely nothing to do with money or social status or business connections. Everyone deserves a warm meal and a safe place to rest, especially when there are children involved. My mama always said that kindness comes back to you when you need it most. As Marcus extended his calloused, work-hardened hand to help her up from the cold concrete, Victoria made a split-second decision that would change absolutely everything about her carefully orchestrated plan. She'd intended to maintain her homeless act for weeks, slowly building trust and getting to know potential candidates. But something about this man, something about the way Lily looked at Emma, like they were already sisters who had simply been separated by circumstance, made her want to abandon all her carefully laid strategies. "I'm Sarah," she lied, taking his warm, strong hand and feeling calluses that spoke of honest work. And this is my daughter, Emma. Marcus Thompson. And this little chatterbox here is my daughter, Lily. She's 7 years old and thinks she can solve all the world's problems with soup and kindness. Indeed, the two girls were already holding hands like old friends, whispering secrets and giggling in that magical way children have of instantly connecting. Victoria watched them with growing unease that she couldn't quite explain. The physical resemblance between Emma and Lily was too strong, too specific to be mere coincidence, but that seemed impossible. She knew exactly who Emma's father was, knew the precise night her daughter was conceived, remembered every detail of that relationship, didn't she? As they walked together toward Marcus's modest apartment building, Victoria's analytical mind began racing despite her emotional confusion. She'd built a business empire by recognizing patterns that others missed, by seeing connections where others saw only random events. And right now, watching her daughter laugh and skip alongside Lily, she was beginning to recognize a pattern that terrified her, something that would force her to confront a truth she'd buried 6 years ago, a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about Emma's parentage. Marcus's apartment was a study in humble dignity that made Victoria's chest tight with unexpected emotion. The furniture was clearly second-hand, but meticulously maintained. Children's colorful drawings covered every inch of the refrigerator door, and the lingering smell of homemade soup filled the small space with warmth that all her mansions had never achieved. Victoria, still maintaining her Sarah persona, felt a stab of guilt so sharp it was almost physical as she looked around the tiny space that probably cost less per month than she routinely spent on a single business lunch. "It's not much, I know," Marcus said, suddenly self-conscious as he noticed her taking in their modest surroundings with wide eyes. "But it's home. Lily and I have everything we need here, and that's what matters most." "It's absolutely perfect," Victoria replied with complete sincerity, meaning every word. There was something present in this small apartment that all her sprawling estates and designer penthouses completely lacked, a warmth and love that couldn't be purchased with any amount of money. Lily had already dragged Emma down the narrow hallway to her bedroom, their excited chatter and delighted laughter echoing off the thin walls and creating an immediate intimacy that made Victoria's heart ache with longing for something she'd never experienced in her own privileged but emotionally barren childhood. "Tell me about yourself, Sarah," Marcus said, as he carefully ladled steaming soup into 2 mismatched bowls that were clearly treasured despite their humble origins. "How did you and Emma end up in such a difficult situation? You seem educated, like maybe you had a different life before." Victoria had prepared extensively for exactly this question, crafting what she believed was a believable and tragic story about job loss and eviction that would explain their current homeless state. But sitting in this man's warm kitchen, watching him serve her with the same genuine care and attention he would show a beloved friend or family member, the elaborate lies felt absolutely toxic in her mouth. "My husband left us about 8 months ago," she said, sticking as close to a version of truth as she dared, without revealing her real identity. He wasn't the man I thought he was when I married him. When he abandoned us, everything in our life just fell apart completely." This wasn't entirely untrue, though the details were carefully altered. Emma's father, Richard Blackstone, had indeed been Victoria's business partner and lover 7 years ago. When she'd gotten pregnant unexpectedly, he'd coldly demanded that she choose between keeping the baby and maintaining their business relationship. She'd chosen Emma without hesitation and bought out his shares with money that left her temporarily vulnerable. But the betrayal and emotional devastation still stung like a fresh wound. "I'm genuinely sorry that happened to you," Marcus said quietly, setting the bowl of soup in front of her with careful attention. "Lily's mother walked out on us when she was just 2 years old, said that being a mother wasn't what she'd signed up for, that she deserved better than being tied down to a baby and a man who would never be rich. How do you manage it all?" Victoria asked, genuinely curious about this remarkable man who worked multiple demanding jobs, yet somehow still had infinite kindness and patience left over for complete strangers. "You simply do whatever you have to do," he shrugged, with the matter-of-fact acceptance of someone who'd never had the luxury of choice. "Because giving up isn't an option when you have a child depending on you. Lily makes every sacrifice worth it. Kids don't ask to be born into our adult messes, you know. They deserve the very best we can give them, regardless of our circumstances." Victoria's throat tightened with emotion as she realized she was sitting across from exactly the kind of man she'd been desperately searching for, someone who understood instinctively that love meant sacrifice, that children came first, no matter what personal cost that required. "Daddy! Daddy!" Lily burst into the kitchen like a small tornado of excitement, Emma following close behind with an expression of pure joy that Victoria hadn't seen on her daughter's face in months. "Emma knows all the same songs I know, and she likes the same books, and we both love to draw horses. And look what we made." She held up 2 drawings, one she'd created, one Emma had just finished. They were remarkably similar in style and subject matter, both showing a house with a garden where 2 stick figures that clearly represented little girls played together under a bright yellow sun. Victoria's blood turned to ice as she stared at the drawings. The similarities between the girls weren't limited to their physical appearance anymore. They shared mannerisms, artistic preferences, even the way they held their crayons and formed their letters. These were traits that went deeper than coincidence, deeper than chance encounters. "That's absolutely wonderful, sweetheart." Marcus smiled warmly, but Victoria caught him studying both girls with a puzzled, almost troubled expression. He'd noticed the uncanny similarities too, and it was clearly bothering him in ways he couldn't articulate. "Mr. Marcus," Emma said, with the shy politeness Victoria had taught her, "Lily told me that you work in a really big building with lots of lights and computers. My daddy used to work in a building just like that before he went away." "Oh, really?" Marcus looked genuinely interested, crouching down to Emma's eye level. "What kind of work did your daddy do in his big building?" Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs as Emma's small face grew sad and confused. "Mommy says he was very important and made lots of money, but he decided he didn't want to be my daddy anymore. She says sometimes daddies make choices that hurt little girls, but it's not because the little girls did anything wrong." The innocent, heartbreaking words hit Victoria like a physical blow to the stomach. She'd tried desperately to shield Emma from the ugly truth about Richard's abandonment, but children absorbed and interpreted far more than adults ever realized. "Well," Marcus said gently, his voice filled with the kind of paternal warmth that made Victoria's eyes fill with tears, "some daddies do make terrible mistakes. Big, stupid, selfish mistakes that hurt the people they should love most. But that absolutely doesn't mean you're not the most important, most wonderful little girl in the whole world, okay? Any man who would walk away from you is the one with something wrong with him, not you." Emma's bright blue eyes filled with tears as she nodded solemnly, and Victoria watched this virtual stranger offer her precious daughter the validation and unconditional acceptance she'd been desperately seeking for years. "Can we have a sleepover tonight?" Lily asked suddenly, bouncing on her toes with excitement. "Emma doesn't have anywhere warm to sleep, and she can share my bed. We can tell stories and play games and be sisters." "Lily, that's incredibly kind of you, but," Marcus began diplomatically, "please, Daddy, Emma's my very best friend now. We're practically the same person." Victoria was about to politely decline the generous offer when she caught sight of something that made her entire world tilt dangerously on its axis. Marcus was reaching for his worn wallet to show the girls a photo of something, and there, tucked carefully behind his driver's license, was a small, faded hospital bracelet. A bracelet with a date printed on it that matched Emma's birthday exactly, down to the day, month, and year. Her hands began trembling uncontrollably as impossible pieces of a puzzle she'd never even known existed began clicking into place with terrifying clarity. Marcus would have been exactly 28 years old when Emma was born. The right age, the right timing, the right circumstances. But how could that possibly be true? She knew who Emma's father was, with absolute certainty. She'd been there. She'd lived through every moment of that relationship, every detail of that night, hadn't she? "Sarah, you look absolutely pale. Are you feeling all right?" Or Marcus's concerned voice seemed to come from very far away, as if she were hearing it through deep water. I need some fresh air," Victoria managed to whisper, standing abruptly and nearly knocking over her chair in the process. As she stepped onto the small balcony that overlooked the busy street below, her mind raced frantically through memories she'd tried to suppress for years. The night Emma was conceived had been during Sterling Enterprises' annual Christmas party. She'd been drinking champagne, celebrating the biggest deal in the company's history. Richard had definitely been there that night, but so had dozens of other people. Employees, clients, business partners. So had the cleaning crew that worked the night shift. Victoria gripped the cold metal balcony railing until her knuckles turned white as a memory surfaced from the depths of her subconscious, hazy and fragmented but persistent. She'd been working extremely late that night, long after everyone else had gone home from the party, or almost everyone. There had been someone else there, someone incredibly kind, who'd helped her when she'd had far too much champagne and was crying over Richard's sudden announcement that he was leaving the company. Someone who'd made sure she got safely to the executive lounge to sleep off the alcohol. Someone whose face she'd never clearly remembered the next morning because of the champagne and her emotional devastation. The hospital bracelet with Emma's exact birth date, Marcus's age, the precise timing, the girl's impossible, undeniable resemblance that went far beyond mere coincidence. Victoria Sterling, who had built a $50 million empire on her exceptional ability to see patterns and solve complex problems, suddenly realized with stunning clarity that she might have been living the biggest, most devastating lie of her entire life. And if her growing suspicion was correct, then the man currently caring for her daughter in the next room wasn't just a potential stepfather she'd been searching for. He might be Emma's real, biological father, the father she'd never known existed. The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp Chicago sunshine that made everything look deceptively hopeful and possible. Victoria had spent the entire night wide awake on Marcus's couch, both girls having fallen into peaceful sleep together in Lily's twin bed, their small arms wrapped around each other like they'd been sisters their whole lives, instead of strangers who'd met less than 24 hours ago. She'd barely managed even a moment of rest, her mind churning relentlessly through scenarios and possibilities that grew more disturbing with each passing hour. In the pale morning light, filtering through the thin curtains, her suspicions from the night before seemed simultaneously more real and more impossible than ever. "Coffee!" Marcus appeared in the small kitchen, already dressed in his work uniform for another double shift. His dark hair was still damp from a quick shower, and Victoria caught herself noticing details about him that she had no business observing. The way his simple t-shirt revealed the lean muscles of someone who worked with his hands, the careful way he moved to avoid waking the children. "Thank you so much." She accepted the steaming mug gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around its warmth. "Marcus, I need to ask you something important. It might sound strange or completely random, but I need you to think carefully about your answer." He sat down across from her at the small table, concern immediately etched across his handsome features. "Of course. What is it, Sarah?" 6 years ago, did you work for a company called Sterling Enterprises, the big tech company downtown with the glass tower?" Marcus's eyebrows shot up in obvious surprise, and Victoria caught the flash of recognition in his eyes before he could hide it. "Yeah, I did work there. I was part of the night cleaning crew for about 2 years. It was good, steady work. Why would you ask me something like that?" Victoria's heart pounded so violently she was certain he could hear it echoing in the quiet kitchen. "Do you remember anything unusual happening around Christmas time that year? December 15th specifically? It would have been a Friday night. The specific date seemed to hit Marcus like a physical blow. He set down his coffee cup with hands that were suddenly shaking, his face going pale as memory clearly struck him with unexpected force. December 15th, he repeated slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. That was the night when... The night when what? Victoria pressed gently, though her heart was racing with terrified anticipation. Marcus was quiet for a long, agonizing moment, staring into his coffee as if it contained answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of a memory he'd apparently tried to forget. There was a woman working extremely late that night. Someone important, from one of the executive offices on the top floor. She'd been at some kind of company Christmas party, and she was. She was completely devastated, crying like her heart was breaking. She'd just gotten some terrible news about her business partner leaving and taking half the company with him. Victoria's entire world tilted dangerously as the missing pieces of that horrible night began falling into place. Richard had announced his departure that very evening, in front of the entire Christmas party crowd. She remembered the humiliation, the way conversations had stopped and people had stared, the way she'd felt utterly betrayed and abandoned. She was so completely broken, Marcus continued, lost in the painful memory. I was just trying to be kind, to help someone who was clearly suffering. She kept saying she was going to lose everything she'd worked for, that she'd never be able to trust anyone again. I stayed with her for hours, made sure she was safe, that she wasn't alone. What exactly happened that night? Victoria's voice was barely audible, though she was terrified of the answer. Marcus looked up at her then, and she saw the precise moment when recognition began dawning in his intelligent brown eyes. The way he studied her face, the growing confusion and disbelief in his expression. "Sarah," he said slowly, "what's your real name? Your actual name?" The question hung in the air between them, like a live electrical wire, crackling with dangerous potential. Victoria had built her entire elaborate plan around gradual revelation, careful trust-building over weeks or months. But now, faced with the truth she'd been unconsciously running from for 6 years, all her carefully constructed strategies crumbled into dust. "Victoria," she whispered, the word feeling strange and heavy in her mouth. "My real name is Victoria Sterling." Marcus went perfectly, utterly still. "The CEO, you're the woman from that night. The woman I'm the woman you helped when she was at her lowest point," Victoria finished quietly. "And Emma might be. Emma is my daughter," Marcus said slowly, understanding flooding his features like sunrise. "Emma is our daughter." The words hung in the air between them, like a confession that changed everything. From down the hallway came the sound of the girls beginning to wake up, their sleepy chatter and innocent laughter a stark contrast to the life-altering tension crackling in the kitchen. "I thought she was Richard's child," Victoria said, her voice breaking with the weight of 6 years of lies she'd told herself. "I was so certain, so absolutely sure. But looking at her and Lily together, seeing that hospital bracelet from Emma's exact birth date, the way they're practically identical," she trailed off, unable to finish the devastating sentence. "That's impossible," Marcus said, though his voice lacked conviction. "You would have known. There would have been signs, tests, something. I was drunk that night, emotionally destroyed. And you were so incredibly kind to me, so gentle and caring when I needed it most. When I woke up the next morning, I remembered Richard being there earlier, remembered him announcing he was leaving. I just assumed." She couldn't complete the thought. "We need a DNA test," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the earth-shattering implications. "We need to know the truth for absolutely certain." "Mommy!" Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, rubbing sleepy eyes with small fists. "Are you okay? You look really sad and your voice sounds funny." Victoria's heart completely shattered as she looked at her precious daughter, at the little girl who might have been growing up with her real father all along, if not for Victoria's assumptions, pride, and devastating mistakes. "I'm okay, sweetheart," she managed to say through the tears that threatened to overwhelm her. "Mommy's just talking with Mr. Marcus about some very important grown-up things." Lily bounced into the kitchen behind Emma, her infectious energy filling the small space with joy despite the tension. "Daddy, can Emma stay with us forever and ever? We're going to be real sisters and have amazing adventures and build blanket forts and learn to cook like you do and—" "Slow down, baby girl," Marcus laughed, though his eyes remained locked on Victoria's with an intensity that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. "We need to figure some very important things out first." As the girls chattered excitedly about their elaborate plans for the day, completely oblivious to the life-changing conversation happening around them, Victoria made a decision that terrified her more than any high-stakes business negotiation she'd ever faced. "There's something else," she said quietly to Marcus while the girls were distracted by their breakfast. "I haven't been completely honest about who I am or why I'm here. I'm not actually homeless, Marcus. I own Sterling Enterprises. I'm worth over $50 million. Marcus's coffee cup slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers, shattering against the kitchen floor with a crash that seemed to echo like gunshots. Coffee splashed across the worn linoleum as the girls looked up in surprise and confusion. "You're what?" His voice was hollow with complete disbelief and growing anger. "I came here pretending to be poor because I desperately wanted to find someone who would love Emma for exactly who she is, not for my money or what I could provide," Victoria rushed to explain. "But now, with everything we've discovered—" Marcus stood slowly, his face cycling through shock, betrayal, and something that looked dangerously like rage. "You lied to me. You've been lying about absolutely everything this entire time." "Yes. But you have to understand." "Get out!" The words were quiet but absolutely final. Victoria felt as if she'd been physically slapped. "Marcus, please, let me explain everything. I said get out." His voice was louder now, drawing alarmed attention from both girls. "I don't know what kind of sick, twisted game you're playing here, lady, but I want absolutely no part of it." "This isn't a game." Victoria stood as well, her own anger and desperation flaring. "Emma might be your biological daughter. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "How convenient." Marcus's eyes were cold now, filled with disgust. "Rich lady needs a daddy for her kid, so she finds some poor sucker who'll believe any ridiculous story she spins. It's not like that at all. Then prove it. Prove that any of this is real and not just another manipulation." Victoria reached frantically for her purse, pulling out her real identification, credit cards, business cards, concrete evidence of who she truly was. But as she spread them desperately across the small table, she realized how utterly hollow and meaningless they looked. How could she possibly prove that her feelings were genuine, that her search for Emma's father had been motivated by love rather than calculation? "Mommy?" Emma's small, frightened voice cut through their heated argument like a knife. "Why is Mr. Marcus yelling at you? Did we do something bad?" Both adults looked down at the two little girls, who were clutching each other with wide, confused eyes, clearly frightened by the sudden explosion of adult anger and tension. "I'm sorry," Victoria said quietly to Marcus, her fight deflating as quickly as it had ignited. "I never meant for any of this to happen like this. I never wanted to hurt anyone." She knelt down carefully to Emma's level, smoothing her daughter's hair with gentle hands. "Come on, sweetheart. We need to leave now." "But, Mommy, I don't want to leave Lily. She's my best friend. We were going to play and have fun today." "I know, baby girl. I know how much that meant to you. But we have to go right now." As Victoria quickly gathered their few belongings, she caught Marcus staring at the two girls with an expression of pure, undiluted anguish. Whatever anger and betrayal he felt toward her, it was abundantly clear that the possibility of Emma being his daughter had shaken him to the very core of his being. "This isn't over," Victoria said quietly as she reached the apartment door, Emma's small hand clutched tightly in hers. "If Emma is your daughter, she deserves to know her real father. And you deserve to know your own child. If she's mine," Marcus replied, his voice thick with barely controlled emotion. "Then you've stolen 6 precious years from both of us, 6 years I can never get back." The devastating words followed Victoria out the door and into the harsh Chicago morning, where her chauffeur waited discreetly with the Bentley she'd hidden several blocks away. As they drove through the city toward her penthouse mansion, Emma pressed her tear-stained face to the window, watching desperately until Lily and Marcus disappeared completely from view. "Mommy, why did we have to leave?" Emma asked through her sobs. "Why can't we stay with Lily and Mr. Marcus? They made me feel happy." Udris. Victoria had no answer that would make sense to a 6-year-old. She'd come to this neighborhood looking for a father for Emma and might have found her daughter's real biological parent. But in the process, she'd also discovered that some truths were too painful and complicated to bear, and some lies too devastating to undo. The DNA test would tell them definitively whether Marcus was Emma's father. But Victoria was beginning to realize with growing dread that getting the test results might actually be the easy part of this nightmare. The truly hard part would be figuring out how to build any kind of family or relationship from the complete wreckage of her deception and the years of truth they'd all been denied. 3 days had passed since Victoria's world collapsed in Marcus's small kitchen, and she hadn't slept more than a few hours total. Her penthouse suite overlooking Lake Michigan felt like a gilded prison as she paced the marble floors, Emma's constant questions about Lily and nice Mr. Marcus breaking her heart with each innocent inquiry. "Why can't we visit Lily today, Mommy?" Emma asked for the 100th time, looking up from her expensive toys that suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the simple joy she'd found in that modest apartment. "You promised we could be friends." Victoria knelt beside her daughter on the Persian rug that cost more than most people's cars, brushing golden hair from Emma's face with trembling fingers. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt the people we care about most. Did you make a mistake with Mr. Marcus?" The question hit harder than any boardroom confrontation Victoria had ever faced. "Yes, baby. Mommy made a very big mistake." Her phone buzzed against the coffee table, Dr. Patricia Hendricks returning her call. Victoria had contacted the city's most discreet geneticist that morning, someone who specialized in paternity testing for high-profile clients who couldn't risk public exposure. "Ms. Sterling, I received your rather urgent message. You mentioned needing expedited paternity testing with absolute confidentiality." "Yes," Victoria confirmed, moving to her home office where Emma couldn't overhear. "How quickly can we get results?" "For the premium service, 72 hours from sample collection. But I must warn you, if this involves any kind of custody dispute or legal proceedings." "It's not about money or custody," Victoria interrupted. "It's about a little girl who deserves to know her real father." After arranging the appointment, Victoria stared out at the city skyline, watching tiny figures move through the streets below. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably heading to work at Sterling Enterprises, cleaning the very offices where she made decisions affecting thousands of lives. The irony was suffocating. Her assistant knocked softly. "Miss Sterling, there's someone here to see you. He says it's about Emma." Victoria's heart stopped. "Send him up." But when the elevator doors opened, it wasn't Marcus who stepped into her penthouse. It was a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and calloused hands, wearing a simple blue dress that had seen better years. "Ms. Sterling, I'm Rosa DeLuca. I own Mama Rosa's Diner." Victoria recognized the name immediately, the restaurant Marcus had mentioned, where he'd wanted her to take Emma for a warm meal. "How did you find me?" "Marcus is like a son to me," Rosa said simply, settling into the offered chair without invitation. "He's been coming to my diner since he was Lily's age, back when his mother was working 3 jobs and could barely afford to feed him. When he didn't show up for work yesterday or today, when Lily came crying to me about losing her sister Emma, I knew something was terribly wrong." "He told you about us?" "He told me enough." about a homeless woman named Sarah who turned out to be Victoria Sterling, about a little girl who might be his daughter. Rosa's weathered hands folded in her lap. That boy has been alone for so long, raising Lily by himself, never asking for help even when he was down to his last dollar. And now you've given him hope for something he never knew he'd lost, then ripped it away. I never meant to hurt him, Victoria whispered. Intent doesn't matter much when the damage is done, Rosa replied firmly, but I didn't come here to scold you like a child. I came because that man is destroying himself with questions he can't answer, and that little girl is crying herself to sleep asking why her daddy won't talk about Emma anymore. Victoria closed her eyes, the weight of her deception crushing down like a physical burden. What do you think I should do? Get the test done, find out the truth, and then, regardless of what it says, you figure out how to fix what you broke. After Rosa left, Victoria made a decision that went against every instinct her wealth and power had taught her. She was going to Marcus, whether he wanted to see her or not. The Sterling Enterprises night shift was just beginning when Victoria used her executive key card to enter the building. She'd never been in the offices during evening hours, never seen the army of invisible workers who kept her empire running while she slept in silk sheets. She found Marcus on the 42nd floor, methodically cleaning conference room windows with the same careful attention he'd shown when serving her soup. He looked up as she entered, his face immediately hardening. "Security escort you up here?" he asked without stopping his work. "I own the building, Marcus. I don't need an escort." "Right. I forgot I'm talking to my boss." His voice carried bitter irony. "Here to fire me for fraternizing with management? I'm here to apologize and to ask you to take the paternity test." Marcus set down his cleaning supplies and turned to face her fully. "Why should I believe anything you say? How do I know this isn't just another manipulation?" "Because I brought Emma with me." As if summoned by her words, Emma appeared in the doorway, having been waiting in Victoria's office down the hall. The little girl's face lit up when she saw Marcus, and she ran to him without hesitation. "Mr. Marcus, I missed you so much. Is Lily here too?" Marcus's carefully constructed walls crumbled as he knelt to Emma's level, his voice gentle despite his anger at Victoria. "No, sweetheart. Lily's at home with Rosa, but she misses you too. Can we see her, please? We were going to build a fort and playhouse and be sisters." Victoria watched Marcus's face cycle through pain, longing, and desperate hope as he studied Emma's features. In the bright office lighting, the resemblance to Lily was even more pronounced. "Emma," Victoria said softly, "can you wait in Mommy's office for a few minutes? The grown-ups need to talk."
After Emma reluctantly left, Marcus stood slowly. "You're really serious about this test?" "I've already arranged it. Dr. Hendricks is the most discreet geneticist in the city. We can have results in 3 days. And if she's mine, then we figure out how to be a family, all of us."
Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city lights. "You realize what you're asking? If Emma is my daughter, that means you've kept me from her for 6 years. 6 years of birthdays, first days of school, bedtime stories, all of it." "I know," Victoria whispered. "I know I can never give those back to you. And if she's not mine, if this is all just some incredible coincidence," Victoria's throat tightened, "then I'll disappear from your life completely. You and Lily won't ever have to see us again." "That's not what I want," Marcus said quietly. The admission hung between them, loaded with possibilities neither dared voice. "What do you want?" Victoria asked. Marcus turned to look at her, his brown eyes holding depths of emotion she was only beginning to understand. "I want to believe that the woman I helped that night 6 years ago was real, that the connection I felt wasn't just alcohol and loneliness, and I want to believe that Emma could be mine because—" He paused, struggling with words, "because I've never wanted anything more in my entire life." The genetics lab felt sterile and cold, despite its expensive marble finishes and tasteful artwork. Victoria sat in the plush waiting room, Emma coloring quietly beside her while Marcus paced near the windows. 3 days had passed since they'd provided DNA samples. 3 days of carefully orchestrated visits where Emma and Lily played together while the adults maintained polite, distant conversation. Dr. Hendricks emerged from her office holding a manila envelope that contained the power to reshape 4 lives forever. "The results are definitive," she announced, her professional demeanor giving nothing away. "Would you prefer to hear them privately or together?" Victoria and Marcus said simultaneously. Emma looked up from her coloring book, sensing the tension without understanding its source. "Are we going to see Lily after this?" "We'll see, sweetheart," Victoria managed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Dr. Hendricks opened the envelope with clinical precision. "Based on the DNA analysis, Marcus Thompson is definitively the biological father of Emma Sterling. The probability is 97%. The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria's legs gave out, and she sank into the nearest chair as Marcus made a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. Emma was his daughter, his actual biological daughter. "There's more," Dr. Hendricks continued, her voice carrying an odd note. "During our analysis, we discovered something highly unusual. We ran additional tests to confirm, but the results are unambiguous." "What kind of additional tests?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "Emma and Lily share significant genetic markers beyond what would be expected from half-sisters." Victoria's blood turned to ice. "Half-sisters?" "According to the DNA evidence, both children share the same biological father. Marcus Thompson is the father of both Emma and Lily." The revelation exploded through the room like a bomb. Victoria stared at the doctor in complete shock, while Marcus went perfectly still. "That's impossible," Marcus whispered. "Lily's mother is Rebecca Chen. I know she's Lily's mother. I was there when she was born. I signed the birth certificate." "The DNA doesn't lie," Dr. Hendricks said gently. "Both children are your biological daughters. However, neither child shares genetic material with Rebecca Chen." Victoria's mind raced as impossible pieces suddenly clicked into place. "Marcus, what exactly do you remember about the night Lily was born?" "Rebecca went into labor early. She was 7 months pregnant and I was working. By the time I got to the hospital," his face went pale, "she was already in delivery. The nurses said it had been complicated, that she was exhausted and sedated." "Did you see Lily being born?" "No. Rebecca said she didn't want me in the delivery room, said it wasn't dignified. When they finally let me see them, Lily was already cleaned up, and Rebecca was barely conscious from the medication." Dr. Hendricks looked between them with professional concern. "I think you need to consider the possibility that there was a mix-up at the hospital. It's rare, but not unheard of." "A mix-up," Victoria repeated numbly. "Emma was born at Chicago General on March 15th, Marcus said slowly. "What hospital was Lily born at?" Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. "Chicago General, March 15th. It's the same hospital, the same date. 2 babies born to 2 different mothers, but somehow both carrying Marcus's DNA. "We need to find Rebecca," Victoria said suddenly. "We need to find out what she knows." Marcus was already pulling out his phone. "She left when Lily was 2, moved to California, but I kept track of her address for Lily's sake in case." He dialed a number he clearly knew by heart. The phone rang several times before a familiar female voice answered. "Marcus, is everything okay? Is Lily hurt?" "Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth about the night Lily was born." There was a long pause on the other end. "Why are you bringing this up now? That was 7 years ago. Please, Rebecca, it's important." Another pause, longer this time. "Marcus, there's something I never told you." Victoria's heart stopped beating. "The night I went into labor, everything happened so fast. I was scared and alone, and the hospital was chaotic. There was another woman there also giving birth. Rich lady, very upset about something." Victoria and Marcus stared at each other in growing horror. "When I woke up after the delivery, they handed me a baby. 'Your baby,' they said, 'but Marcus,'" Rebecca's voice broke. The baby they gave me didn't look anything like either of us. She had blonde hair and blue eyes. You have brown hair and brown eyes. I have black hair and dark eyes. What are you saying? Marcus's voice was deadly quiet. I think they gave me the wrong baby. I think the blonde woman got my dark-haired baby, and I got hers. But I was young and scared, and when I tried to ask questions, they said I was just confused from the medication. They said sometimes babies change appearance as they grow. The phone fell from Marcus's nerveless fingers, clattering on the marble floor. Victoria stood slowly, her entire worldview reshaping itself around this impossible revelation. Lily isn't your biological daughter. She's mine. And Emma. Emma is yours. The babies were switched, Marcus whispered. All these years we've been raising each other's daughters. Dr. Hendricks looked between them with professional sympathy. I think you both need to sit down. This is obviously a tremendous shock. Lily, Victoria breathed. That's why she looks like Emma. That's why they're so similar. They're not half-sisters who happen to share a father. They're full biological sisters who were separated at birth. The truth crashed over them in waves. Victoria had spent 6 years raising Marcus's daughter while he'd raised hers. The connection they'd felt, the instant bond between the girls, the uncanny resemblances, it all made devastating sense now. Rebecca knew, Marcus said, his voice filled with betrayal. She knew and never said anything. She was 19 and scared, Victoria said quietly, and probably by the time she was sure, it seemed too late to fix. Fix? Marcus laughed bitterly. How do you fix something like this? How do you tell 2 little girls that everything they've known about their family is a lie? Victoria thought about Emma, about the daughter she'd loved and raised, but who belonged genetically to this man. And she thought about Lily, the little girl she'd felt an instant connection with, who was actually her biological child. We don't tell them it's a lie, she said finally. We tell them it's the most amazing miracle that ever happened. 2 sisters who found their way back to each other against impossible odds. Marcus looked at her with something that might have been hope. You think they'll understand? I think they already know on some level. Look how instantly they bonded. Look how similar they are despite being raised completely differently. Dr. Hendricks cleared her throat. If I may suggest, you might want to consider family counseling. This situation is unprecedented, but there are therapists who specialize in helping families navigate complex relationships. As they left the genetics lab together, Victoria felt the strangest sense of completion. She'd come looking for a father for Emma, and instead discovered that Emma already had a father. The same man who'd been raising Victoria's biological daughter with love and devotion for 7 years. What happens now? Marcus asked as they reached the parking garage. Victoria looked at this man who was connected to her in ways she'd never imagined possible. Now we figure out how to be the family we were always meant to be. 6 months later, Victoria stood in the kitchen of a house she'd never imagined owning, a modest 4-bedroom home in Marcus's neighborhood, complete with a backyard where 2 little girls could play and a front porch where neighbors actually talked to each other. The sterling penthouse sat empty now, a monument to a life that had been beautiful but hollow. "Pancakes are ready," she called out, still getting used to the domestic rhythms that had replaced boardroom meetings and power lunches. Emma and Lily thundered down the stairs together, now inseparable in ways that went beyond their initial magical connection. Family therapy had helped them understand their unique situation, that they were sisters who had taken a long journey to find each other, as Dr. Martinez had explained it. The girls had accepted the truth with the remarkable adaptability of children, more excited about finally being real sisters than troubled by the complexity of their origins. "Mom, can we have chocolate chips?" Lily asked, wrapping her arms around Victoria's waist with the casual affection that had developed over months of shared mornings. The word "mom" still made Victoria's heart skip. Lily had started using it naturally about 3 months ago, while Emma had begun calling Marcus Dad around the same time. They'd let the children lead, never forcing relationships, but allowing them to bloom organically. "Just a few," Victoria laughed, dropping chocolate chips into the batter, while Lily helped by stealing half of them. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his work clothes replaced by weekend casual wear that suited him far better than his janitorial uniform ever had. Victoria had quietly arranged for him to transition into a management position at Sterling Enterprises. Not charity, but recognition of leadership qualities she'd observed during their complicated courtship. "Coffee smells amazing," he said, kissing Victoria's cheek with the easy intimacy that had developed between them. Their relationship had been built backward, crisis first, then friendship, then slowly blooming love, as they navigated the unprecedented challenge of blending their switched family. "Dad, Emma says I can't braid her hair because I'm not good at it," Lily complained. "Emma, what do we say about hurting people's feelings?" Marcus asked gently, ruffling both girls' hair. "Sorry, Lily, you can practice on my hair any time." Victoria watched this morning routine with constant amazement. A year ago, she'd been a lonely workaholic desperate to find meaning beyond profit margins. Now she was part of something she'd never believed possible, a real family built on love rather than obligation. "There's something we need to talk about," Marcus said quietly as the girls ran outside to play before breakfast. Victoria's stomach clenched. Despite their happiness, she sometimes worried that Marcus would decide the complications were too much, that he'd be better off with someone whose life hadn't created such an impossible situation. "What is it?" Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know we did everything backward. Kids first, house second, relationship third, but I was hoping we could do this part in the traditional order." Victoria's hands flew to her mouth as Marcus dropped to one knee in their sunny kitchen. "Victoria Sterling, you turned my world upside down the day you sat on that street corner. You gave me back a daughter I never knew I'd lost, brought me the love I'd given up hoping for, and showed me that families can be built in the most extraordinary ways." His voice was steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life loving you and our amazing, miraculous daughters?" "Yes," Victoria whispered, then louder, "Yes, of course, yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple, perfect band that had probably cost him months of savings, Emma and Lily came crashing through the back door. "Are you getting married?" Emma shrieked with 6-year-old excitement. "Does this mean we're going to be a real family forever?" Lily added. "We've been a real family since the day we found each other," Victoria said, pulling both girls into a hug that included Marcus. "But yes, we're getting married." The girls erupted into cheers and immediately began planning the wedding with the kind of elaborate enthusiasm only children could muster. Later that evening, after the girls were asleep and wedding preparations had been temporarily exhausted, Victoria and Marcus sat on their front porch, watching the neighborhood settle into evening quiet. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Giving up the penthouse, the corporate lifestyle, all of that?" Victoria considered the question seriously. She'd restructured Sterling Enterprises, transitioning to a co-CEO arrangement that allowed her to work from home 3 days a week. The company was more profitable than ever, but more importantly, she was finally living instead of just achieving. "Never," she said firmly. "I spent 27 years building a fortune that left me completely empty. Now I have everything that actually matters." "Even though it started with you lying to me," Victoria winced. The deception still stung, even though they'd worked through it in counseling. "I was looking for something real in the only way I knew how. I just never expected to find something this miraculous." Marcus took her hand, thumb tracing over her new engagement ring. "You know what the strangest part is? If the babies hadn't been switched, none of this would have happened. You would never have come looking for me, and I would never have known Emma existed." "Maybe everything happens for a reason," Victoria mused. "Maybe Emma and Lily were meant to bring us together, even if it took 7 years and the most complicated circumstances imaginable." As if summoned by their parents' conversation, a small voice called from upstairs. "Mum, Dad, can we have a family sleepover in the living room?" Victoria and Marcus looked at each other and laughed. Family sleepover had become code for the girls wanting reassurance that their unusual family was permanent and unbreakable. "Coming!" Victoria called back. As they headed inside to build blanket forts and tell bedtime stories, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She'd started as a desperate mother pretending to be homeless, searching for a father for her daughter. She'd found so much more: the father Emma had been born to, the daughter she'd been separated from, and the love of her life who'd been right there all along, cleaning the offices where she'd built her empire. Sometimes the most extraordinary families were born from the most impossible circumstances. And sometimes, when you were brave enough to risk everything for love, the universe gave you back more than you'd ever dreamed possible. 1 year later, at their simple backyard wedding, Emma and Lily served as joint flower girls, scattering petals while wearing matching dresses and identical smiles. In her wedding speech, Victoria told their guests that she'd learned the difference between being wealthy and being rich. Wealthy was having $50 million in the bank. Rich was having a family that chose to love you every single day, despite your mistakes and because of your heart. She'd never been richer in her life. Rosa De Luca, now honorary grandmother to both girls, raised her glass in a toast to families that find each other against impossible odds and to love that's strong enough to heal any wound. Baidu, as Victoria danced with her husband under string lights in their modest backyard, surrounded by neighbors who'd become family and children who'd proven that blood wasn't the only thing that mattered, she realized she'd finally found what she'd been searching for her entire life. She'd found home, found